So welcome to New Testament. I want to do a short video on an introduction for the class so that you kind of know what's going on. You feel comfortable with all the information, requirements, assignments, etc. So let me just share my screen real quick and let's go right through the class here. So we are in Introduction to New Testament. You've met me already through a video. I want to encourage you to think about this class as a journey for yourself, as a personal exploration into the most widely sold book in the entire world. Over a third of the population of the world believe that this book, called the New Testament, is God's Word. And no matter if you've never even heard of the New Testament, or you have a daily practice of reading from it, and your family and yourself are honoring Christ and like seeking to live your life according to the teachings, no matter whatever or wherever you're at on the extremes or in the middle somewhere, this class hopes to give you information about what the New Testament is, what are the claims, why do people follow it, and also it seeks to challenge. So for those who are very familiar with the Bible, hopefully we'll present some things that may be a little bit of a challenge for you. For those who have never read the New Testament or anything of the Bible, I hope this provides a good introduction for you to really explore the text on your own. The goal is for you to read through the New Testament and for you to be able to personally engage the teachings of the New Testament for yourself, because so many people talk about the Bible, but I want you to be able to read the Bible for yourself. Now, in the first week of our class, the first week is going to feel pretty heavy. There's a lot of background stuff that we have to do. And in the first week, you're going to say, goodness gracious, when am I ever going to get to the Bible? Yet the background becomes really, really important because it makes you able to kind of pick up on things as you read along. So what you're going to need for the class is you're going to just need the NIV or the New International Version of the Bible. And I have linked in the beginning module where it says link for the Bible. That'll take you right there. Also on your phone, you can use the U app and just click on the NIV, because there are about 60 English translations of the New Testament. So you want to make sure that you're using the NIV. Of course, this class seeks to provide an overview of the 27 books of the New Testament in their historical, social, religious, and literary context. But I also want this class to be a personal challenge for you. But what does it look like to develop compassion, empathy, and mercy and grace in your own life? And what does it mean for you to ask questions about God and God's people? The class will be designed around, let's see here. Class is going to be designed around readings, videos, and your reflections upon those. Let me just stop this real quick and pull something else up here. And let's look through the modules real quick. As you can see here, let me just give you a quick insight of what's going to happen for our class. The first couple of things you're going to do for class, you're going to post your introduction video. You will have a 15-minute conversation with me. And then each week, we'll have 4 weeks of the class, and you'll have a discussion post that will typically be designed around the chapter that you'll read, and you'll post on the chapter. You have to have that post done by Friday of each week. And then by Sunday night, you'll go in and comment on at least one of your classmates' work, okay? Each week you'll have a video to watch. This first week, you'll be watching a video on the Roman Empire, particularly when the Jewish people of Israel revolted against Rome, and what does that do, and what did that do? How does that shape the New Testament? And then for the first week of class, you'll have a short video to watch and to take notes on, and you'll have some readings to take notes on. In the first week, that's going to be the rhythm of the class until we get to the last day of the week on Friday, when we actually start reading from the Bible. And from there, you'll be given passages of the Bible to read and questions to reflect on or something to write about. And then starting in week 2, you'll have a discussion board, a video, but each day the readings will no longer be from a textbook, but actually from the Bible itself. A couple things: that there are no tests in this class and there are no quizzes. Everything will be writings. Now, some of you, writings and notes, right? So the difference between notes are like your random thoughts and insights that you're taking from the video and or something you're reading. And you might ask yourself questions in there, all that. Say, hey, I didn't know this. But your writing is a little different than just simply notes. So there are an assignment that says, hey, post your notes. I mean, just like regular notes. But when it comes to your writings, that's when I'm going to give you a particular prompt, such as, what are you learning in this? Where do you feel challenged? What does Jesus's teachings mean for us today? And this is when I ask for writing, I'm asking for you to give me a Word document, double spaced, proper punctuation, paragraph form. Okay, please don't do that on your phone. Okay, I want you to actually make it like a written paper. Now, with that, let's come back and talk about more of our class. So in the course, I do seek to give you everything I've got. And it's with an online class, but you will have every day, there will be an available lecture that you can watch. Now, some of you aren't going to be lecture people. You just kind of dive in and do your assignments, and that's okay too. But there will be a PowerPoint for you to view and a lecture for you to look at if that's what you want to do. I would really encourage you to do that. I'll try to keep the lectures to about 20, 25 minutes, but will be where you get a lot of your really helpful information. So when we think about studying the New Testament, what we have to ask ourselves is what do we bring to the table? What are our preconceived notions and ideas? So for example, for me, when I come into a Bible class now, I come in with the idea that the Bible is, it's inspired by God, that God has given us the words of the text and given us the passages and the meaning and the purposes to invite us to live in a way that mirrors God's desire, will, and God's ways on the earth. So that's one of my preconceived notions in that. Maybe you bring a preconceived notion, but also maybe you've been hurt by the Bible. I'm very aware that minority persons, maybe people inside the Pride community, have been wounded by the text. And we also need to acknowledge that, some of us maybe come in with some hurt that we need to just be aware of as we begin to process. Now, we know that as we begin to study the Bible, the New Testament, there are 3 different types of writing inside the New Testament. There's a writing called the Gospels. There's a writing which is the majority of the texts, known as letters or epistles. And then there's finally an apocalyptic writing, which is Revelation, which so many people want to talk about. In the intro slide, or the opening page of this week, I have given 3 short videos on what a gospel is, what an epistle is, and what an apocalyptic literature is. So you can click on those videos and find out more if you want that. It's important to know that the New Testament was written completely in Greek. It's not written in English. It didn't come into English until 1400s. And the New Testament, these 27 different documents compiled into one book, it's really like a library, right? The Bible is more like a library than it is a regular book. And it has different audiences and different authors. So it took about 40 years, 45 to 50 years of writing to get all the books that we have now inside the New Testament. And it really wasn't for another 100 years until people were saying, this is the list that we want. But surprisingly enough, it took almost over 350 years from the start of the writing of the New Testament to the time that they closed the list and said that this is the list that will be forever the Bible. We call that the canonization process. So it took 350 years for that. And in a later video, I will talk about how they did that. How did they decide these are the letters that we want? Now, for the New Testament, it's important to realize that for a third of the world, this is a book of faith. This is a series of books, or a series of letters that strengthen, support, and encourage faith. The New Testament itself describes itself as a book of instruction, text designed to help a person, particularly a community of people, a group of people, live in a way that honors and lives out the teachings of Jesus. But when we study the Bible, we have to realize that we are having a different culture or different cultures, maybe different religion, definitely historical information, and people's claims about God. All of those go into a stew and make the New Testament. It's unlike today where we have our personal Bibles and we read them quietly by ourselves. The New Testament was not designed that way. It was designed as letters designed for communities that would have been read out loud. And that can be a little different than what we're used to, because we're so used to the New Testament, we think it's just kind of written for us, but really it's written for a group of people. Now, some things that have become really important is that we will do some thinking about what it means for the fact that Jesus, his mother, all of his disciples, St. Paul, excuse me, all of these people were Jewish. So what does it mean that the star of the New Testament, Jesus of Nazareth, was Jewish? He read from a Jewish Bible. His worldview is first century. He's a first century Jew in an occupied space of the Roman Empire. So we'll have to think about what's called the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible also, and even the expectations that were laid on Jesus by people like a guy by the name of King David, who was a king about 1,000 years before Jesus, who was seeking to honor God with his heart, but also was a warrior. So when people say Jesus is the son of David, we have to step back and ask, what would that mean in the first century for the expectations of that being placed on Jesus? Also, we have to understand that Jesus is a prophet, meaning that he is a person who's coming in the line of a long series of people who believe that they were speaking for God in their immediate time. And then also there is a term that's being used for Jesus in the New Testament, Jesus as the Messiah, or you might say today, Jesus as the Christ. Now, the Messiah is a term that way predates Jesus, was from the Old Testament, and the Messiah literally means an anointed one who has been gifted, called, and equipped by God to lead God's people. The Jews believed the Messiah was going to come and to lead the people, but also to renew and restore the land, meaning that Messiah would come and set God's people free from any political oppression and set them on a path towards fully obeying all that God was asking them to do. And this has manifested itself in the land that the Jews believed they were given, called Israel, right? So Israel, believing that they've been given this land and they're waiting the Messiah. So when Jesus comes along, people say, some people say Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God. And Christians today make that claim. Jews do not make that claim, but Christians make that claim that Jesus is the one that we've been waiting for. He is now the teacher who will not only shows us who God is, but will also, in the end, usher in the eternal, perfect reign of God. Some people call it heaven, some people call it eternal life, but there will be this next stage of existence where there will be no more mourning, suffering, crying, or pain. Now, when it comes to the New Testament, the actual book of the New Testament, we have to remember that there are no original copies running around. There are no original documents. We don't have any zero of the original manuscripts. Everything we have are later manuscripts that people then have translated from the original Greek into, Latin, into English, into German, into, Swahili. And of course, the most popular translations are what's known as the King James Version or the KJV, which a lot of churches in our area will read from, or the NIV, which we're going to use. And now, when it comes to the fact that I say there are no original copies, some of you automatically are going to say, oh my goodness, well, then I can't really trust this document. It probably has all kinds of errors and forgeries. But we do need to be honest when we look at other ancient works, whether it's the works of Homer or Plato or Caesar, that there are no original copies of those documents either. Original copies of ancient works just don't exist because they're ancient, and number two, that preservation didn't work the same way that we have today. But also, what happens if you have a document that a warring party wants to destroy, right? So some manuscripts of different works have just been destroyed by people who didn't want them to flourish. So when we compare what we have of the ancient manuscripts of the New Testament, when we compare them to other ancient works and to say, okay, like how close to the originals are the copies that we have, and how much of the copies do we have, and how much do these copies match each other, we're going to find out that the New Testament about 99% of the time matches. So when you put the copies together, they match, and that we have copies of the New Testament within 50 years of the first writing, which is miraculous in relationship to other ancient works. So for example, Plato, the great philosopher, the oldest work we have of Plato is about 1,200 years after when we think he would have written his first work. So within the New Testament, we have within 50 years. So you can compare 1,200 years or 50 years. So you can see how that stands out, right? As we look through the New Testament, we're going to meet some people like Jesus of Nazareth or Jesus Christ. They are the same person, but I will refer to Jesus of Nazareth because that's where Jesus was from. People would have known him as that. And I also want to make sure that we never forget that Jesus was a real person who lived in first century Israel. So there's also Paul, the apostle, or St. Paul, I'll call him, John the Baptist, John the disciple of Jesus, and many others. In our class, we have to be aware that we need to ask ourselves some questions when we begin to read the Bible. And the number one thing is, what does the text actually say? Not do what we think it says, but what do the actual words say? I'll give you an assignment. If you go back into the Gospel of Luke, so if it's the third book of the New Testament, if you look at Luke chapter 16, starting in verses 19 to 31, there's a story of a rich man and a poor beggar named Lazarus. And the poor man's laying at the gate. The rich man ignores him. They both die. They go to different places in eternal life, one place into a place of comfort, the other one into a place of suffering. And although the words heaven and hell are not mentioned in this text at all, people will read heaven and hell into it. So if I ask someone about Luke chapter 16, verses 19 to 31, and we read it out loud, someone's going to say, well, this story is about heaven and this story is about hell. And I'm going to say, well, wait a minute. What does the text actually say? Because it doesn't say those things. So we're actually reading them into the story. So number one, what does the text actually say? Number two, we have to make sure that we're exploring the context, what's going on around historically, literarily, and what's literally going around the story. Because as we read the Bible, it's like we're jumping in, we're borrowing someone's cell phone, beginning to go through their text messages and randomly pulling out texts. We would need to know what's going on, what was said before or after, to understand what the text fully mean. And then because we are an interpreter of the New Testament, we're reading it, we're seeking to apply it, we have to understand what your own context is today. For me, I'm a white man who's heterosexual, married, middle-income American of the 21st century, well-educated. I'm a Protestant. All of these things go into, I'm white. Like all of these things go into English speaker, American passport holder. All of these things go into how I will interpret the Bible in my context. So I have to be aware of that, as opposed to being blind and saying, well, there's just one reading of the New Testament. That's very ignorant, right? Because we know that how I read the New Testament may be very different than, let's say, a poor, illiterate Hindu woman from northern India, right? It may be very different for her than it is for me as we read these texts. So, okay, so that's the introduction of our class. Writings, videos, discussion board, and the final thing is this. In this class, you have what's called a compassion project. That's going to serve as your final. And if you go down to the last week of our class, week 4, there is a long, detailed assignment called the compassion project, worth 20% of your class or your grade. And what I'll be asking in there is that you will volunteer 6 hours of your time over the 4 weeks of our class. So you can do 1 hour a week or 1.5 hours a week and you get 6 hours. You can do it all in one setting. That's whatever you want to do. And then you're going to create a PowerPoint and reflect on the teachings of Jesus and the teachings of the New Testament in relationship to what you did for your volunteering experience. We'll talk more about it. I'll send a video out about what the Compassion Project is, but I wanted to let you know those are going to be the pieces of our class. If you have any questions, please reach out. Okay, take care.